February of this year, the state of Texas suffered a massive electricity generation failure that caused an estimated $195 billion in damage and led to the deaths of at least 151 people. It was later revealed that Texas had intentionally isolated its power grid from the two major national grids in order to avoid federal oversight and deregulate its own energy sector, a move that made it more difficult for the state to import electricity from other states and exacerbated the problem. The tragedy put the spotlight on the grid system in a way that had never been done before. So what can be learned from the tragedy in Texas? Peter Londa is CEO of Tantalus Systems, perhaps the only publicly listed company tackling the grid management sector, but one with decades of experience. Cantech Letter talks to Mr. Londa about all things grid, which also happens to be the company's ticker symbol on the TSX. Hi, Peter. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us, Justine. Pleasure to be here.
Peter, so Tantalus has a pretty long and rich history. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the backstory and when you came into the picture?
Sure. Tantalus was founded back in 1989, headquartered out of Burnaby, British Columbia, so just outside of Vancouver. And over the past 3 decades, we've been building our business and delivering technology solutions to help electric utilities. I'm not the founder. The gentleman that started the company, named Keith Martin, is still involved. But I was recruited in by the board of directors and largest shareholders in 2014 when Tantalus was still privately held. And I've had the pleasure of serving on behalf of our shareholders, board of directors, and working alongside our team now for 6.5, 7 years.
Okay, and your solution, let's talk about that. The Tantalus Utility Network is described as a smart grid technology that enables a utility to monitor, control, and respond to events anywhere and at any time across its distribution network. What typically are you replacing when you take on a new customer?
Yeah, thanks. So we refer to this as TUNET, T-U-N-E-T, so the Tantalus Utility Network. And what TUNET does is it was really designed to help utilities initially, several decades ago, just simply start to automate their metering infrastructure. And so if you think about the electric utility, most people don't think about their electric utility until either the lights don't come on, there's a power outage, or they get a high bill and they call to complain. But that's a good thing. And hopefully the more successful we are with TUNET, the less people have to worry about the electric utility. But what we've typically replaced, and when we first started deploying technology, was we were replacing the manual process of having an electric utility send a physical person to the side of someone's home to take a meter reading, jot down on a piece of paper some digits off of that electric meter, and then go to the next house and the next house, and then eventually get back to the utility's headquarters and manually enter in consumption data home by home to generate a bill. And that's the way utilities have operated for 100 years, since really Thomas Edison created the electric utility long ago. And surprisingly, there are still a significant number of utilities in Canada and the United States, and then as you go internationally, certainly on a global basis, with utilities that still have meter readers, with people that still physically go to the side of someone's home to read consumption data off of meters. So the first generation of our technology was really geared to helping utilities automate the meter reading process and bringing back meter data, not just once a month, but every hour, 365 days a year. And based on that data, then starting to leverage data to automate more capabilities across the utilities' day-to-day operations.
It seems like a far more efficient way of doing business.
Yeah, we effectively are helping utilities in today's world digitize the delivery of electricity. And so if you think about most other industries that we rely on every day, whether that's financial services, whether that's our entertainment with now social media, healthcare as an example, pretty much everything that we do is digitized, right? It ties into a comprehensive network with connected devices. The utility powers all of those devices. Without power, we don't have Wi-Fi, we don't have cable modems, we don't have TV, we don't have telephone in many circumstances. But yet it's one of the last industries to actually digitize every aspect of what they do. And so we like to say we take a meter or another device that the utility relies on, and we turn it into an iPhone. We enhance that device with edge computing capabilities. We help the utilities connect to those devices in real time, and then both send and receive data to those devices, much like our iPhones or other smartphones or smart tablets that we rely on every day for every aspect of our life. We're doing that for the utility. And it's a process that takes an extended period of time because, as you can appreciate, there's a significant amount of infrastructure that's been deployed for decades by utilities, and it takes utilities time to make those upgrades over, over a period where they can A, budget, B, get in some circumstances where required regulatory approval, and then actually changing and adopting their processes internally to be that much more effective, that much more responsive, and most importantly, that much more sustainable.
Okay, and let's just switch gears now and talk about some of these new technologies. Do kind of consumer-based technologies like Nest thermostats or smart appliances, do they have any impact on, I guess, the way you guys manage electrical grids?
When we think about Nest thermostats or Ecobee thermostats or other types of smart appliances, what that's doing is it's really geared towards those devices are and technology are really geared towards helping educate consumers, you and me, on how much electricity we're consuming during different parts of time during the day. And in conjunction with that, not only changing our own behavior and being smarter about how we consume, but also ultimately potentially reducing the electric bills that we have to pay. There's some impact to the utility because what it means is through our own behavior, or in a circumstance where the utility can control those thermostats or smart appliances through technology like ours, it can help the utility reduce what's called peak load, meaning how much electricity do they have to deliver at the hottest days of the year or at the most critical times of the day where people are consuming as much electricity as possible. Where we really see direct impact, though, beyond sort of change of consumption pattern, Nest thermostats and smart appliances, where we're starting to witness and where the utility is really starting to prepare is impact to the physical infrastructure of the distribution grid. What I mean by that is substations, circuits, which are power lines, feeders, which are the lines that sort of connect from a pole top transformer down to our homes or the buildings where we live or work in. And those are getting impacted by things like rooftop solar PV installations, battery walls, electric vehicles as those become more prolific. Because one electric vehicle or one rooftop solar panel installation, it'll impact the meter. It will start to be a source of supply, meaning that two-way source of power flowing from the home. It was originally just a point of consumption. If you put rooftop solar, if you have a battery wall, if you have an electric vehicle, that home becomes a source of supply for the utility. And it's that sort of reverse flow or two-way flow of power that can start to impact the integrity of a meter, feeder lines, which connect us to power grids, pole top transformers, which are an important asset for the utility all the way up to the substation. And it's really, as we try to help utilities prepare for the future, it's the anticipated proliferation of electric vehicles, battery walls, and rooftop solar that we think will have a much more dramatic effect than just changing consumption patterns.
Let's talk about the grid failure in Texas. It was a bit of a watershed moment that really shone a light on your company. How could Tantalus have helped in a situation like that?
Today, we support 7 utilities in the state of Texas, and all of them were unfortunately impacted by what unfolded this winter. So there's a town in Texas, it's Farmersville, relatively small community, but one of our customers that we support, one of the utilities that we support, and their traditional way of dealing with storms or changes in supply and demand when system regulator ERCOT would put in a phone call to all utilities to reduce demand, their traditional way of handling that was to go into substations and turn off circuits and feeders. That's the power lines that deliver power to a neighborhood, as an example. And they would turn off everybody. With our technology, automation at the individual meter level, command and control capability to that meter, and software, the utility was systematically able to go into our system and not turn off the entire circuit or the entire circuit that impacted an entire neighborhood. What they did is they were able to first and foremost identify homes where people had life medical equipment, right, or substantial security issues. And they're able to say, okay, we're going to take those homes and we're going to make sure they have power because people have ventilators or other medical equipment necessary to maintain their health and stay alive. Secondarily, they then looked at other meters or other points of consumption for key security in the town. And they said those meters and those resources will ensure maintain power for the security of the community. Then they took everybody else and they staggered the ability to deliver power. So what they did is they rotated homes by having those homes turn on and turn off remotely with the push of a button on a keyboard, turn off the power to someone's home for a defined period of time, an hour, 2 hours, while leaving their neighbors or someone within on their block with power. So God forbid there's an emergency, you've got a neighbor that you can get to, or you have a family member that you can get to that hopefully has power. Instead of turning everybody off, they staggered it, and it was an equitable share of an inconvenience. What that led to was avoiding, I think they shed their load profile, meaning how much power they delivered, by 30% very quickly, again, with our technology and computing capability and a network and software. And simultaneously, we're able to protect assets. They were able to protect people's homes. There were some pipes that froze, but for the most part, they were able to avoid catastrophic damage for the community that utility serves. And they did it in a very equitable manner where everyone shared as a community to get through what was otherwise a really problematic circumstance. So that's an example of really some idiosyncrasies associated with Texas, but more importantly, how one utility, Farmersville in Texas, used our technology to help their community get through what was otherwise a life-threatening circumstance.
Well, that's really good to hear that, your technology was able to help them in that situation. Let's talk about the decentralized nature of grid management. Here in North America, you have states and provinces controlling grids themselves and not necessarily controlled by federal governments. Does this lead to inefficiencies?
But there's definitely certain inefficiency associated with a deregulated model. With that said, there are efficiencies as well, as opposed to having one government entity try to really oversee or manage the entire electric grid for all of Canada or all of the United States. So I don't know if one's better than the other. We certainly, I think, are pretty efficient in Canada and the United States, certainly relative to other regions of the world. So I think the notion of sort of federal oversight with provincial and state regulators and decision makers and influencers that are driving decisions, from my perspective, is the more efficient path than a more standardized or socialized form of regulatory drivers.
Let's talk about your business operations for a moment. Is there a typical client, I guess, for Tantalus? And what kind of metrics do you share with these clients to kind of win over their business?
Yeah, so we focus on distribution utilities. So those are typically in within that public power, so municipally owned utilities or electric cooperative utilities. Those utilities represent 1/3 of the market in the United States, and that's predominantly where our revenue comes from today. We do support some utilities in Canada, and we have a growing presence in the Caribbean basin, but the vast majority in our heritage is tied to the US electric market. So we're targeting about 1/3 of the US meter population in the electric utility business. With that said, the metrics that we typically provide, or the way in which we try to convey value and a return on investment for utilities to purchase our system. And again, we are selling our systems directly to the utility. That is Tantalus's customer, is the utility. We refer to them as users of our technology. But what we'll typically walk them through is a codified business analysis that ties very much to a return on investment. And within that, how much money can the utility save by automating their metering infrastructure, implementing what's called a remote disconnect meter. So in that example I shared of the utility in Texas turning on and turning off people's power at the home with the push of a button on a keyboard, there's tremendous economic savings in doing that. And you don't have personnel that has to physically go to the home. You don't have a truck that has to drive both to and from that home, which is producing greenhouse gas emissions through a gas or diesel truck. You don't have, in many circumstances, unionized labor, particularly after hours, charging time and a half. So there's economic savings tied to the automation of metering. What we're also doing is in collecting data from meters, not only are we targeting consumption, but we're also able to help utilities pinpoint power quality issues. And so through that, we've built a set of tools. And in March, we launched our first AI-enabled data analytics tool, which helps the utility pinpoint where they have a pole top transformer that is stressing, where do they have insulation issues or problems with their feeders and circuits. Those are power lines. From that, we can help the utility plan out their CapEx budget over a foreseeable future, in addition to avoiding what otherwise could be catastrophic damage. So if you think about wildfires that are unfolding as we speak in California, yet again, sometimes those are caused by Mother Nature. Unfortunately, sometimes those are caused by utilities. How that happens is a pole top transformer, which is that cylinder box on utility poles that has a lot of power lines going into it and out of it. Sometimes those fail. When they fail, it could be a power outage at a few homes, but it also could be a device that starts to spark. And if you have very dry climate and brush or bushes underneath, those sparks sometimes can come down the power line or to the power from the power pole, the utility pole. They land on that brush catches fire. Winds take that fire. You can have really catastrophic issues. So that's an example where we can help utilities, particularly in certain regions of the country that are susceptible to wildfires. We can help them pinpoint where do they have issues with existing infrastructure that needs to be maintained, watched, and then ultimately replaced before you have a catastrophic event. There is a dollar savings, there is a community savings, there's an environmental savings or impact associated with that. Those are the types of metrics that we can help the utilities identify in convincing them to become users of our technology. To that end, and sort of a further to your question, once a utility selects Tantalus as its partner and deploys our technology, our systems are typically deployed for anywhere from 12 to 15 years. It's the hardware component of our business. It creates a great opportunity for us to learn, collect data from those devices over a very long period of time, compare that to weather patterns or different times of year, understand consumption patterns, and from there build an enhanced set of analytics tools and software tools to really automate and overhaul the way in which electric utilities operate today.
And your company is listed on the TSX as Grid, and many people might not know of any other, company that focuses on the electrical grid. What is your total addressable market, and what kind of research is out there to kind of support what your company does?
Through some third-party research groups that we track regularly and through our own analysis, we believe our total addressable market opportunity in the United States alone is approximately $3 billion on what we refer to as our connected devices, the devices we're putting into the field to automate that metering infrastructure and the delivery of electricity for utilities. On the software side of what we do, that's a growing segment of our business. It's been growing at about 25 to 30% compounded annual growth rate each year for the last 7 or 8 years. And we're just starting to scratch the surface. We see that as another billion-dollar type opportunity over the next 5 to 7 years. So in the aggregate, probably about a $4 to $4.5 billion opportunity that we're chasing just in the United States today before we really start to look at other regions of the world. In terms of research coverage, as a newly listed company, we currently have an analyst from Cormark Securities that has initiated coverage on our stock and on our company. And we are on the watch list of an analyst through Paradigm Capital.
For people thinking about investing money in your company, how does Tantalus make money? Is there a recurring revenue aspect to your business?
So great question. About 69 to 70% of our business today is from the sale of our devices. It's our own intellectual property, but physical devices that we sell to the utility that get deployed into the field. Those devices are from our perspective very important because they're there for 12 to 15 years, and it's what creates the command and control capability for utilities. The balance of our software, so roughly 30 to 31% of our revenue today is from software and services. We refer to that as both recurring and repeatable in nature. Recurring in the form of software license maintenance and technical support agreements that are in place with utilities, and then ongoing software licenses for the enhanced capabilities that we're delivering on the software side. That the hardware is really where Tantalus started, and the communications network, all of which requires hardware. It's the data from those devices that then feeds into, right, a collection of data that we can build software and analytics tools on top of as we scale. And so we have historically relied on more of a perpetual software license with then an annual maintenance or maintenance that goes on through the life of our systems. With our data analytics tool, we are just starting to launch a SaaS offering around a subscription based where it will be a per meter per year type fee for the analytics tools that we bring into the market, all of which ties to the data from the devices that we deploy.
Okay. And looking ahead now, what can people expect from your company in the next year?
Yeah, so we're in a very fortunate position to first and foremost have been able to become a publicly traded company up on the TSX. I think we're continuing to evaluate ways to further strengthen and bolster our balance sheet as we identify and try to execute on a number of growth initiatives. But what people can expect to see is a continued commitment to helping electric utilities truly digitize and automate their grids. And we're going to do that in a few ways. Organically, we'll continue to try to expand our user community, which now stands at over 190 utilities strong. And we've got a great history of consistently adding new utilities every year. And we'll share that information through our quarterly filings. But what investors can expect to see is our continued ability and success of adding more utilities to our user community in order to sell more capabilities, obviously, and drive revenue. Incremental to that, organically, a number of R&D initiatives that are already underway that really will tie to monetizing the data that our devices capture around software and analytics tools. We've got some exciting things that are forthcoming. Inorganically, as we think about truly expanding our business and accelerating the growth of the company, as a publicly traded company, we'll look to leverage the currency in the form of our stock and the growing strength of our balance sheet in terms of accessing more capital to accelerate and expand the total addressable market opportunity that we can pursue by bolting on additional technology capabilities that integrate well into what we already do and solve incremental problems for utilities that we're already supporting.
Okay, looks like there's lots to look forward to in the coming year.
We hope so, Justine, and we'll look forward to continuing to share that through Cantech.
Okay, thanks so much for your time, Peter.
Thank you.
That was Peter Londa, CEO of Tantalus Systems. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time.